What is there to say about baseball? As the quintessential experience in the history of video games, countless reviews have come before this one, but this retrospective intends to be the definitive retrospective of all the 3D baseball games.
The Wii Virtual Console edition of the game is the definitive version of baseball for the NES. There's no reason to play the inferior NES original, nor the popular LARP alternative.
You have to understand that we've only played 10 minutes of this baseball game and no other baseball game before, which I know is a death sentence in the baseball community, but I watched a Dark Souls Let's Play before, so I think I know a thing or two about game design.
But before we get into baseball, let's talk about something else more important. Dark Souls 1 on the Amiga.
At its core, baseball is a very simple game about two things: slamming your wood down on balls and touching people with your balls. Once you get some lip-smacking good batting in, the game has a random chance to send the ball flying. I forget what happens next, so just take my word for it. If the enemy army grabs your balls, you will be punished and unable to move, as they have the squeeze on you. This references the curse in Dark Souls 1, which turns you to stone.
Much like high school, the game is all about stealing as many first bases as you can before you're sentenced to death by the enemy squadrons. Like Dark Souls, it's a very complex game, but at the same time, a simple game. It's entirely on the player to progress. There's no hand-holding, no tutorial, no tooltips, and the AI is quick to punish any mistakes.
This is my favorite video game of all time. It was my first baseball game, but looking at it objectively, not blinded by nostalgia, it's important to recognize the game's faults. My biggest complaint is how strictly linear the game's progression is. You're only able to run to the next base via a straight line. What if I want to skip to second base? Or even to third base? What if I don't want to run any bases at all? What if I want to do the catacombs before Underdeadburg? The game just doesn't take this into account.
Baseball is a very early Nintendo title, and it shows. The game was developed by Abner Double Dimmadome, a Japanese high school student from Hokkaido, Japan. And while it was his only title ever developed for the Nintendo Enterprise, his influence still remains in games to this day, like Super Smash Bros. And Earthbound. The game was the first to feature Nintendo's favorite technique, the rule of thirds, or trebling. There are 3 bases you have to run before you can score a point. The game was developed during a time period where, to justify a purchase, game time had to directly translate into hours, which is a notion I fundamentally disagree with and is very unwelcome. Making the player run 3 bases takes so long, and it's just blatant padding to increase the game time and make sure you can't get a refund on Steam.
My biggest complaint about this game is the fact that you can't parry the ball after the batter hits it. A real man's game like tennis, also developed by Albus Double D, gets this right. You're able to run any direction you want and explore the court freely, and you're able to continuously parry, only ending when you or your opponent fails to counter. It's entirely on you, the player. Not being able to parry back the ball to the batter just feels like artificial difficulty. Unlike the thrust in the original Legend of Zelda, which isn't actually artificial difficulty due to technical limitations of the time, believing that it should be something a later game in the series does with perfect hindsight is fucking stupid, but I really wish we could just hit the ball back to the defender.
On the positive side of things, the game's world is seamless and immersive. Much like in Dark Souls or Super Mario 64, you can see places in the world space you'll be visiting later in the game. You can see third base from the home plate. It's crazy, and I love it. See that mountain over there? You can climb it. I just wish the game gave you the freedom to explore these beautiful places at your own pace. rather than railroad you onto this linear story progression. Twilight Princess did this and it was actually good, because my nostalgia tells me so. But this game does it wrong. And here's why.
The game's graphics are inexcusable. The palette is dull and washed out. There's too many hard edges, no anti-aliasing. You can't change performance over graphical fidelity. The game runs at 2 frames per second. I don't understand how a game released in 2007 can look this trite when Crysis came out in the same year and it looks phenomenal. Baseball even had the advantage of being released on the Amiga, a system that had the superior graphics technology at the time of competition with the PC, which Crysis was released on.
Looking at the history of popular opinions and reviews of the game, it's heralded as a masterpiece. But I think that's far from the truth. Overall, baseball is a mechanically flawed game and by far the weakest entry in the baseball series. The crushing difficulty, the mediocre graphics, and the incomprehensible story don't do the game any favors. The core gameplay concept is brilliant, but the execution is flawed in this title.
Thankfully, Nintendo didn't abandon this concept, and in 2006 gave us Baseball Episode 2, Opposing Force. This was localized in North America as Wii Sports, for some reason, but I'll be referring to the definitive version in this critique.
The most notable change is the graphical quality. Gone are the days of hard pixel edges and disgusting color palettes. The game is fully rendered in 3D, and none of that chibi nonsense in Baseball 1. This means the game feels like a real stadium, a fully realized world. That makes this game able to be far more immersive, and therefore better.
Now, the thesis of baseball is still the same: slam a few balls, steal a few bases, achieve victory, but there is something still missing from this experience. But first, let's start with the positives. A lot of the padding has been removed. As you can see, after scoring a hit, there is no pointless running around the bases. Everyone's played the first game, they know what's supposed to happen. None of that garbage wait time. I really like this change because it removes the pointless, tedious filler. I know what I'm supposed to run to the base, and since I know that's what I'm supposed to do, there's no reason to make me do it every single time. Every single time.
Now, contrary to most people who play this game, I really like the new gimmick Nintendo added for this title. That's right, the motion controls, which substantially benefit the bat combat, and are a welcome addition to the series. However, it's done extremely poorly, and doesn't work at all with the formula. I would have preferred the option to use a traditional controller to play the game, as it's always better to give the player more options and more player freedom.
But like I said, something is still missing. Where is the damn parrying? Look at a real man's game, Dark Souls 1, which did this right. Look at this amazing boss fight where I can parry the pitch back at him and rush the mound and just beat him with my bat. The padding is palpable. I wish that Nintendo had adopted this system to Opposing Force, since it would give the player more options and thus be an objectively better experience overall.
The game does one thing right, adding several new game modes to mix up the pace of the game. You're given a batting challenge to score as many hits as you can, a challenge to control your swing timing in conjunction with managing your stamina meter, and a challenge to score as many touchdowns as possible. However, these modes are entirely optional and disconnected from the main story. Therefore, it's bad, ruining the fully realized world and dashing my immersion. It's even worse than Epona being optional in Ocarina of Time. Nintendo should have forced these modes down your throat, along with the super popular horse and all of its massive girth. Because Twilight Princess did it, and that was cool. Yeah.
Let's get to what makes this the black sheep of the baseball saga, and why it fails as a sequel to Baseball 1. It's so damn easy. My dead grandmother could play this in her sleep. As a matter of fact, this is captured with her playing the game to prove this exact point. I actually played this game against my friend while I was sitting in a bathroom, and I still managed to win very easily. All you need to do is listen for the sound and swing. It's that fucking easy. That's it. If I wanted an easy game, I wouldn't have played a video game, because all video games should be held up to the same standards. And those standards are plainly outlined in the Soulsborne Die Twice series, which is of course my favorite series.
I understand why Nintendo didn't quite get the difficulty right on the first go with Baseball 1. It was the first in the series, it was bound to have flaws. This, however, came out on the Wii, the most technologically advanced console ever made. Nintendo had no excuse for missing the mark a second time. I can't prove anything, but I suspect this was due to them rushing the game to meet holiday demands. They should have structured the difficulty more in line with the difficulty of the NES version, instead of focusing on more accessible gameplay for a casual audience.
Regardless of all of this, Baseball 2 is near and dear to my heart, don't get me wrong. I actually think this is the best game of all time, or damn near close at least. Just stop and think. Put nostalgia out of your mind and out of the gutter. Has any other game surpassed the genius of opposing force? The clear answer is no, except for one. Baseball 3. We are third pieces. I hate this game.
Yeah. Released in 2001 by Sega Soft, in collaboration with Khmer Rouge Games. The ultimate torture method was developed for use on the Vietnamese soldiers who survived the massacre. They spilt the blood of at least one virgin's, but not more than a lot, and cursed it with mild swears and cartoon violence, giving it a PEGI 13. Where do I even start?
First off, this game has zero graphics. Where are all they? I literally cannot see this game because I do not have Flash in this browser. I find it very disingenuous that Nintendo expects me to buy extra peripherals not included with the base game. Luckily, I found a fan patch called baseball.exe and it was only 200 kilobytes. But come on, Nintendo, you made Skyward Sword.
The thesis of this game has been radically changed. Bases and home runs have been entirely removed. Squadrons have been retired, and it is now a one-on-one epic duel of the fates between the chosen hitter and the cursed pitcher. Nintendo embraced a change I personally suggested to them in my last video, making the gameplay more in line with Dark Souls, a real man's game. This game is actually known as Pooh Souls, as it features the popular Kingdom Hearts protagonist Winnie the Pooh, and his how the fuck do you say that? Muramasa baseball bat. I am glad Nintendo moved to include actual characters from their lineup instead of generic mannequins. However, what I cannot forgive is there still no goddamn parry system. The pitcher is at a major disadvantage, and it cheapens
the parry system in this game is phenomenal. Finally, you can hit the ball back at the stupid pitcher. Of course, it doesn't hit him because video games weren't advanced at this time, but being able to actually hit the ball is a godsend in this franchise. Props to Nintendo for this innovative step in the right direction. One thing that does stand out is the game's singular focus on the goal ahead of you rather than a linear path. Moving in a straight line is no longer a problem, and the game is almost free of padding in this case. The only thing that matters is the performance of the player and not the performance of the environment, thank God.
The switch to a boss rush style of progression is brilliant, albeit copying off of Ocarina of Time 3D, the definitive edition of Ocarina of Time 3D for the 2DS. There's now a tangible sense of progression to the game, much like Dark Souls, which is a good game. Also like Dark Souls are the new RPG elements. Whenever you rest at a bonfire, you have the option to spend your souls to level up your attributes. These are not mandatory, but will help you smooth out the difficulty spikes as the game progresses. What I don't like is how the difficulty does not scale to the player's ability. The second boss will always be the same level of difficulty no matter how well you did on the first stage. It also doesn't get harder if you beat the stage and then replay it. The difficulty is static. Now this just makes the game feel difficult in an artificial way.
Furthermore, there is no New Game Plus mode. I don't get how a Souls-like game can be released nowadays without including one. It adds so much replayability to the game that not having it is a detriment that you really just can't ignore. Maybe the game developers were going for a hollow feeling to fit with the whole Dark Souls thing, but it just doesn't work out, unlike in Dark Souls. There's a clear correlation between hours played and money spent, which I do not appreciate in my AAA games.
The more I think about it, this game is a pile of dog shit. All in all, it has some pretty solid foundations and a nice difficulty that bridges the gap between 1 and 2, but I'd have rather it been more like 2. This game may not be the best, maybe not even 5th best, but it might be higher than 14th best. I find myself coming back to it almost naturally, as a matter of fact. The more you think about it, it could be the best game of all time.
But there's one very important thing regarding all these games we've yet to mention that will change this retrospective entirely, and that is the music. It's pretty good! This has been the Martian Nights. I hope that you have the time of your life at precisely the right time tonight at 11:32 p.m. on the dot.
Good night, everybody.